Hey everyone, welcome back to But Why the Reviews. I'm Kate, editor-in-chief and managing editor of the film, TV, and anime section, and I'm here with Charles,
Hello.
and we are talking Alice in Borderland Season 2. Charles, you reviewed the first season for us. Give us a quick thoughts of what you had coming into Season 2.
Okay, this was easily one of my most hyped returning shows for this year. I loved Alice in Borderland season one. If I remember correctly, you were in the same boat as me, where everyone was like, "Oh my God, Squid Game," and I was like, "Yeah, Squid Game's great. Watch Alice in Borderland. It's better."
Exactly.
So yeah, I was very excited to get to check this out and come on and talk about it and everything. How about you?
I was excited, just like you. It was probably my most hyped show. So if you're out there and you clicked on this because you're new to Alice in Borderlands, the concept is really simple. Arisu gets isekai'd to a deserted Tokyo, and in the process of getting isekai'd, he's not isekai'd into like harem worlds. He's isekai'd into death game worlds. And so you have death games, which is like its own genre within anime, manga, and live actions. And then you have isekai. It really works well because the stakes are consistently very high. Essentially, you beat a game. That game correlates to a suit of cards. I believe, was it spades are physical, hearts are games of betrayal, clubs are team games, and diamonds are games of wits. The number on the card tells you how many days you have left to live before a
No,
giant
that's the
red
difficulty.
beam. Huh?
That's the difficulty. They always
The
have 3 days
difficulty.
on their visa.
Oh, okay. I thought it correlated to the days that they get for it too.
No, just
No?
difficulty. They
Oh,
always have
okay.
3 days on their visa.
Okay. Always have 3 days on their visa. If you don't hit your visa and you don't re-up it, you get a giant red laser beam that shoots through your head coming down from the sky. It's really cool. It's based on Haru Aso's manga. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because right now it is being officially released in English by Viz, as is the uh Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, which is his zombie end of the world thing. Anyway, that's the gist of Alice in Borderland. Last season left off with everybody collecting 40 cards from the whole set. There's 52 cards in a set. They have collected everything but the face cards, and now this season is about tackling the toughest games that we have seen yet. And I'll be honest, I was excited, and I think every game really paid off on how difficult it was, how intricate it was, and how violent they all were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that all of the games are really cool. The only, and I don't know if it technically counts as the game or not, but the whole thing with the King of Spades, I
That
thought
one
was a
was
little,
Yeah, that was interesting. We're gonna keep it like as spoiler light as we
of course,
can, but episode one literally opens with the King of Spades.
Spades. Yeah,
And it is essentially when you get to the king level of each suit, it is everything that you've done before, but like worse. And kind of like more intense. And the King of Spades acts as essentially just somebody hunting down everybody with guns.
it's
Uh
yeah,
everywhere. There
it's
is
like
no
the
limit for where the game, like the entire continent, the entire country, as they call it, is the arena,
his game.
essentially. Yeah.
If you're not
So,
in a game, you're in his game.
yep.
But like that's the only one that's like it's a little weird because there are no rule, there isn't that structure that everything else has in the show where this is how it works. It's just like, oh, there's this dude shooting at us, we need to run.
Yeah.
But
Which I think for me it worked mostly because if you're gonna throw somebody into the most physical game you could think of, the most physical game is just staying alive. So that worked for me on that level. I also liked the tension that it added because I think in season one there are these quiet moments where things kind of, I don't want to say drop pace, but it gives you a breather. It lets you kind of breathe between everything that's happening. And in season two, the pace is like rapid fire from the start. Um, pun intended. And I think that like what that does ultimately is it never lets you as a viewer get comfortable with who's going to survive a game. And that's something we learned in season 1, is that plot armor isn't necessarily there for anybody but Arisu. And that is something that I like. It's something that I think media tends to fumble every now and again, but I think the way that they've adapted it here works really well. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it does help have that level of tension to it. At the same time, the biggest reason why season 2 drops a little bit below season 1 for me, I think is because of the fact that like I really loved that season 1, while it had the games and it did all of those really cool things, it also had the beach where there
Yeah,
was like a power dynamic and interpersonal struggles, and like all that sort of element is just in this season it's just the games,
yeah,
which like I think are done really cool and I love it. But I did kind of mess that, like, because most of these games, whether it's this or Squid Game or like Dead Man Wonderland, any of those, they always have some sort of interpersonal struggle along with survival. And that was a
yeah.
little absent in this season, I felt.
See that? I think for me, the beach and like power dynamics ends up getting thrown out the window for sure. But then you have the internal piece of like, do I want to stay in the borderland? Do I want to become a citizen of of the country? Or do I want to leave? Because the entire thing hanging over season 2 is okay, was I forget his name, but was the dude who ran the beach correct? We have to get all the cards, we have to beat all the games, and then we can leave.
Can we escape?
And what you see multiple times throughout this season are people kind of grappling with, okay, but my life was like really bad outside. Maybe I throw this game and try to stay with the team that's here so that I don't have to go back to it.
It's
And I think that is something that it's probably not explored as much as it should be outside of the last episode and a couple here or there, but I really appreciated it.
I really I really did like the element in, like, there was the one particular game where they really bring it up, again, no spoilers, but where they do that whole like you can win this battle easily or you can risk winning the war,
Yeah.
but it might not happen. Like they had that
Yeah.
sort of element of how which one is better for you sort of thing, which I did think was very interesting when
Yeah.
that comes up for sure.
I will say, so far as I think one of the things that this episode or this season does is in season 1, Arisu is the focus of everything. Like it's central. Like everything he goes through, you see for the most part until like the last 2 episodes ish is when you kind of venture out and see other people doing games. But this season, you see the entire main cast essentially going through their own games alone sometimes, and I think that actually I love Arisu, but I think because I've started reading the manga and I'm reviewing the manga right now on the site, he is 10 times more annoying and like just dumb in the manga. And I think that now that I have that reference point, I'm like, oh, I don't want to see him. I do actually want to go to other people. And so I kind of appreciated seeing the different ways that people handle the games too, because they each have their own strengths and you understand the way that they work as a team, and you understand that, oh, well, actually, if Arisu is in this game, he may not have survived because he doesn't have the same skill set,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I also really liked just a very small thing, but it's the sort of thing that some shows wouldn't do, and I really liked it that this one did, where there's one point where Arisu's trying to find someone and he's just going past, and like as he's going by, like a game's getting out and all kinds of people are running out and they're like, we did it, we beat the, I forget which one it is. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh look, someone other than Arisu or the white-haired guy can think their
Yeah.
way through a game and actually win. That's good to know.
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna bring up, I actually really, really liked Chishiya, who is the white haired guy, because I like the battles of wits and betrayal a lot more than I like the physical challenges. Complete honesty, because I think that by showcasing the Hearts and Diamonds games, I would say probably more so than the physical games this season, I think it allows you to kind of get into a space with the character in a different way than you would if you just saw them trying to physically survive.
Mhm.
Specifically, there is a game where it's essentially you don't know the trying to figure out how to say it without spoiling things. You don't know the suit that you've been assigned, and you
It,
have to trust other people to tell you the suit correctly in order to advance to the next level. And it's a game that could be endless.
it,
So technically, if you decide to never like lead somebody wrong, you have endless amount of food, you have electricity, you could just live in that game until things go sideways. And what it does, and I think it's the best episode of the season in my opinion, because it breaks down people dynamics so well. And you see these micro relationships that we've only known for 15 minutes, like crater, and it somehow has a lot of emotional impact.
yeah, yeah, it's
Did you
very
have a
much.
favorite episode or game?
Well, um, before I say mine, I have to admit, Kate, I'm shocked that your favorite game was not the King of Clubs.
Yeah. Okay, so I loved the King Clubs game. We can't reveal it because it's in the no spoilers list of what we can't say. But I did love the King of Clubs games, and when you all watch season 2, you will know exactly why. That entire dynamic is actually very good because that is a
I
very thoughtful
as
game.
as ridiculous as certain elements of that thing is, I think that that game is probably my favorite because I do love how the King of Clubs and Arisu come to interact with each other
Yeah.
and the things that like it very well establishes like in order to get through some of this, characters, particularly Arisu, will have to do things that they do not want to do.
Yeah.
Like that I think that game is really great. And it definitely is like it opens the show really strongly. Um, Making me think of that game because I think it goes from that one into the one you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did you find it as weird as I did? I mean, this isn't really like a big story thing, but just a very odd structural choice that like they have the changes happen like mid episodes.
Yeah. So for more context, you're talking specifically about like instead of one game per episode, a game will run into a new episode and then like
Yeah, it's like
switch
20
to
minutes
another
in
game.
and then it shifts and then it splits
Yeah.
it again at the end of this. Like, that's so weird.
So I thought it was weird. I the official translation of the manga hasn't caught up to where well, it's caught up to where season 2 is starting, but it isn't past that. And so I'm wondering if it is a choice to capture some of the pacing in the chapters in the manga with the time that you have for an episode. I am really interested to know how much it is like Asu's manga because the first season deviates greatly. Like all the plot points are there, but the games, a few of the games are entirely different. And so I would be really interested to see how Shinsuke Sato, who's the showrunner of the live action series for both adapting it and directing it, I would be really interesting to see like what he changed and if that was like the right choice. Because I think it works most of the time as kind of like that hook to make you press play to the next episode. And then there were other times where it was just very frustrating.
Yeah, like I didn't necessarily think it was terrible. It's just like
Yeah,
when it started doing it, I was just like, why are they like you just always assume, oh, Arisu will finish his game, they'll introduce the next game, or at least show who's going to be in it, and then that'll be episode break. But
yeah.
oh no, it's still going. Oh, okay, that's
I actually found it was really hard to understand how long I had spent playing or not playing, watching the show. Because there it wasn't like, okay, this is episode was a game, this episode was game. It just all kind of blended together. And by the end, I was at episode 8 and I was like, oh, I binged it all, which, that's probably why I did it. So were there things that you thought that the series could have done better, I guess?
um well, I mean, I I felt like a couple of characters, after the initial introduction, I felt like a couple of characters, particularly like Anne and I'm going to butcher her name, but Kuina, I think.
Oh, Karina and Usagi? No.
The
Oh yeah, Anne. I know you're talking about. Yeah, Anne. And
yeah, the
then
Anne and then Kui. Is it Kuina?
I
Is
think
that
it's
the
Kuina.
um?
Yeah, I think it's Kuina.
Okay, like they like. I mean, especially her because she's my favorite character in
Oh,
the
I
whole
love her.
story.
She's amazing.
I I felt like they got Anne's whole thing. Like it seems like it's kind of going somewhere, but then doesn't.
Yeah.
And Queen, I just wanted more time with her. Like that was my biggest issue with how the show ultimately formatted its story. Is like, yes, we're gonna get an entire season with her and the white haired dude whose name I can never pronounce, and it's gonna be
Chishiya.
great. And then it kind of shifts. And I'm like, oh, I'm not getting to see her like I wanted to. That sucks.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, without going into spoilers, while there were some great moments in the end of this season, damn, that just kept going. Like, oh, rip the band-aid off and just do it
Yeah.
already.
I so I agree. I think that I don't want to say that it's a bloated cast because I think every single character we see is just really good. Like they're just really good characters. But I agree that some of them, especially because there's the choice to give background flashbacks to all of the suits or all of the face cards, all the people running the games. Um, it it kind of, I don't want to say meanders, but like it starts something really interesting and then it'll kind of lose it. And I think with Anne, where it's like this is a character we've been with since last season, this is somewhere we should see more. And we just see little branches where she's coming into other pieces of the narrative and then it's just gone.
And it feels like her
Um,
narrative's going somewhere, and it kind of introduces concepts that get explained elsewhere, but it doesn't really come anywhere with her. It's like,
yeah.
okay, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that that's like that's the Achilles heel of the show. I don't think it's a perfect season. I think season 1 was better because you got to know everybody. And so when there was emotional impact, there was large emotional impact. And I think that there are certain elements in season 2 where like it really could have been perfect and it really could have like surpassed the last season. And then I honestly feel like they ran out of episode count. Like this probably should have been like a 12 episode show if they wanted to actually go down all the ways, which is weird because I agree with you that the last episode drags
Oh, it's
like
right.
a lot.
They do the whole like, so do you really want to know if you can go? Like,
Yeah.
yes, they want just tell them already. God, this
So
is
I
so
so I enjoyed the playing around with it. And without giving any spoilers, like the character that gives the information, they give like a whole bunch of different examples of what could be. Like what could be the reason that they're there? What is the world really? And it kind of jumps between them. And there's not real closure at the end per se as to what the Borderland is. And I like that, but like you could have fit it all into like maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You didn't need an hour. And I
yeah,
think that's what hurts it.
yeah. So I will say, with that whole sequence, I do, and I think there's a couple of little scattered things throughout the larger season as well. I did like a bit of the stronger literary reference,
Yes.
which I thought was
Of
cool.
to Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There were like more nods that were like, oh, like I like when the final person announces their game, and I see them like, oh, I know
Yeah.
why they're
You
doing
get what
that.
this is. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's obviously like Alice in Borderland isn't that much
Oh yeah,
of
no, of course they had the
like
Hatter in the first season. Like it's
exactly.
obviously there, and they play around with it a little bit.
Yeah, it
I
is
get that the
definitely
white hair
more
guy's
here
supposed to
though.
be the Cheshire Cat
Yeah,
and
it is
stuff,
definitely
and
more here though. And I
but
appreciate the way it's done too, because like it's done in a way that is like very overt, but then also wink, wink, nudge, nudge at the same time too, which I really
yeah,
appreciate. And I think just the adaptation of like less of a literal translation and more of this is the psychology of that character represented in these people. And I think that works really well for the flow of the series and ultimately makes it something that lasts a lot longer than just, okay, here's another isekai, or okay, here is another iteration on Alice in Wonderland.
And since you mentioned that again, it hadn't occurred to me, but I guess I can actually like isekai.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't put that together, but I'm like, oh,
I like two
isekai.
I like Inuyasha and Alice in Borderland. I don't like isekai, man. I don't get it. If you love it, I'm so proud that you have something that you love. I love death games, there's a ton of it. But no, I can't do isekai. Death games though, death games are really good. And I think that is something as we come to close. My final thing really is that I think Alice in Borderland is a show that sticks because yes, it's a death game model. And it is very much that genre. It's heavy sci-fi. It's heavy action. I mean, this season is bloodier than the last season. This season is way more violent while also being more cerebral than the last season. And I think what it does well for the genre is it really highlights the importance of teamwork and the importance of interconnection with people. And I know you said that you don't feel like we got like a lot of those spaces, but for me, I felt like it was because we had a lot of the bonds established in the first season. And so now they just kind of ran with it. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I really appreciated with it, especially because there was a more investigation of what would you sacrifice to stay alive? And would you sacrifice, I can't mention that because that's a spoiler, but would you sacrifice something that traditionally you are taught to protect instead? And I think that when you're pushing people to the limits, death games burn out because it's just constant push. Alex in Borderland succeeds because it's a push, introspection, why the choice is being made. Push, why is this happening?
Well, that and unlike a lot of them, it does also have that, like, it isn't just, okay, we're waiting to play the next, like, it's not like Squid Game where we're sitting in the room and now we play the game, and their journey,
there's exploration.
They have to find food, they have to, like, there is more narrative to it than just, all right, play the next game. Even though that is like the big beat. Absolutely, yeah. The only other last little thing that, and that's just because this is something that always hits me and I feel like I have to call it out. As much as I love a lot of the drama that goes into some of the final moments, it did bug me a little bit that they kind of break the, like, like, this has been one of those shows that, like, if you get shot, if you get stabbed, you're effed.
Oh,
like, you die.
Yeah.
And near the end, they start playing a little faster and loose. So it's like, it's been hours.
They do start to play fast and loose with injuries. No, they do start playing fast and loose with injuries, like, for sure.
but even setting that aside, I still, I mean, while I don't think it, I think another thing that I have to say in the defense of this, and why, like, I think it might not slam quite as hard for me as season 1 did, is also the fact that season 1, like, I'm sure I've probably seen something of this sort of concept before, but like Alice in Borderland was the first time, at least recently, I had watched this sort of death game series, and it blew me away. Since then, I've watched Dead Man Wonderland, Squid Game. It's been coming out a bit, so like the concept of it itself is like, okay, we're going back to death games, but it still does it really well.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, and I think that's a really good point to kind of bring up too, is like, so I have sought out the death game genre since, like, I first saw Battle Royale. And I first saw Battle Royale because somebody was like, oh, you like Hunger Games? It's actually ripped off of this Japanese manga called Battle Royale. And I was like, okay. And I fell in love with it. And Gantz is another phenomenal death game that is all hard sci-fi. Not the anime. The anime is trash. The actual manga is phenomenal.
I was about to say, they had a sale on the Xbox store for a bunch of anime, and Gantz was one of them.
The anime is not good.
I watched like 3 episodes, like, I'm going to kill this lead protagonist myself.
Oh yeah, no. So you will still do that in the manga, but the difference is unlike Alice in Borderland, the main guy in Gantz isn't always the main guy in Gantz, because literally nobody is protected by plot armor for anything. Gantz is really cool. There's like the mangaka really likes Danny Trejo, and he puts Danny Trejo in like chapter 300 of it. It's a very long series. It's also very good and very sci-fi. It's one of my favorites of all time. Also very dark. If you don't like a lot of stuff, just read trigger warnings on it, because it's probably not. But that is to say, like, I am like born and bred in Death Game. But I don't think that I have been blown away by how a Death Game has been handled in a long time. Like, I think the first season of Alice in Borderland took me back to the excitement that I had when I watched Battle Royale for the first time, the Japanese film. And I think that is something that's very hard to catch. I also think that that's why Squid Game did so well, was because it was like baby's first Death Game. Even though, like, in the pantheon of Death Games, Squid Games is actually very tame. Like, very, very tame when it comes to like violence and everything, which, if you've seen that, welcome to Alice in Borderland. It's a little bit darker. And I think season 2, like, I do agree that I think that probably plays into why it's hard to top the first one, and sticking a landing for an ending is also really hard to do. So I think if they had like maybe stretched out some of the games or something and made it into 3 seasons, like, I don't think that would have been good, but it would have probably made this season better than it was, just because that last episode's a bit of a slog. But I love it, and I think everybody should watch Alice in Borderland.
Definitely. It is definitely, and if you enjoy Death Games, and go back, watch season 1 and get to it. If you watch season 1, I would say you definitely want to keep going with it. It's well worth seeing, even if it's not quite the glory, but it's so tough. The first one is almost always the best,
Oh, yeah. And also, it's going to be released in dub and sub, so if you're anybody with cognitive issues who can't really, like, it, or you don't have time, which is probably a bigger thing that people are coming up with, watching shows in the background and not having time, it's coming out in both. Also, I promise you'll start watching it as a background show, and then you're just going to be sucked into it entirely. But yeah, so that's all I had. Do you have any last comments, thoughts, ideas?
I am very curious I'm very curious to possibly learn a little bit more. We'll see. I like, ultimately, while it does have flaws, the big points, the great moments, the exciting games definitely make all of those flaws well worth going through, because it is phenomenal. They ultimately do the closures for the characters very well. Where they get them to at the end is, I'm satisfied with that, even if the journey sometimes gets a little muddled.
Yeah. Well, if you are watching this, Alice in Borderland Season 2 airs in its entirety on Netflix on December 22nd. Viz is currently on Volume 4 of the official translation of the Alice in Borderland series by Haru Aso. And if you like Alice in Borderland, Netflix is also adapting Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, which is the zombie apocalypse touring. It's like a road trip, but like you're doing like bucket list items. It's really good. As always, thank you for watching. Charles, let people know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Gatsu083.
And you can find me at OhMythRandier on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to join the conversation in real time, head over to our Discord, discord.gg/BUTWHYTHO. We are over there, always talking. And yeah, that's it. Give us a like and subscribe and click the alarm bell. I don't know what the kids say.